as many of those as possible. And again, this session will also be recorded, so it will be available on the Water UCI website in a few days for posterity. Again, I want to welcome our panelists, and why don't we begin, Katie, with you?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you so much, David, and thank you so much, Shannon, and everyone at the UCI Water Center for inviting us onto this panel. I'm very excited to participate today. So my name is Katie Janss. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently calling in from Los Angeles on Tongva land. And I work for DigDeep, which is a WASH nonprofit that serves the 2.2 million Americans without access to water, sanitation, and hygiene services. And our mission is to close this water access gap within our lifetimes. I myself work on the Navajo Water Project specifically, which is based on the Navajo Nation out in Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. About 30% of homes out there lack safe water and sanitation services. A lot of them are very rural, not close to any water lines, and so many of them rely on water hauling their own water sources or from water sources themselves. And so what our organization does is we install off-grid water systems. There's a series of piping up into the home with a sink, and then it drains out. It's a very simple system, but for a lot of people, they've never had running water before. We also have been connecting eligible homes to water lines, and we are piloting sanitation systems as well and building bathrooms. I also personally have started a micro grant program for community-led solutions. So people will submit their application with their own project. We evaluate all the projects and then offer a small amount of money to fund their project. So it was grown out of the pandemic when a lot of folks started reaching out to us and said, hey, I'm actually already doing a lot of really great work. And we wanted to sort of honor that and make sure that people who are already doing the work, who are in the community, who know the community best, are the ones who are actually getting compensated for their time and for their labor. So that's all of the stuff that I've been working on and that our organization and our project has been working on. And so I'm just very excited to be here to talk more about it and to hear more about everyone else's work.
Well, thank you very much, Katie. Aria?
Hi, everyone. And I apologize because, of course, my Wi-Fi decided to be unstable right about now. So if I break up a little, please just let me know. But again, my name is Aria Cataño, and I am a co-founder of Water Drop LA. Water Drop LA is a mutual aid group and nonprofit that operates in Southern California and tries to address water insecurity, predominantly in unhoused populations, but also in low-income communities. What we've found in the last 2 years is that water insecurity is a huge issue for the 60,000 plus unhoused people that live in LA and in surrounding counties. A lot of people don't have access to regular running water because of a lack of public water infrastructure. And so people are constantly forced to either purchase water on their own or tap fire hydrants or find other remedial ways of getting regular water access. So for the last 2 years, what we've done as an organization is fundraise at a grassroots level to do weekly water distributions. And what we do there is donate about 6 to 7 pallets of water and get those gallons of water and take them directly to people's tents. And our hope there is that that will be enough water to at least help them make it until the next week. And so we continuously return with those services just to try to fill that gap. However, our long-term goal really is to not have to exist as an organization. What we really want is permanent water infrastructure to be installed by the city or the county. So we are very much so a temporary solution, just in acknowledgement of the fact that it takes a really long time, too long, to get the government to put aside the money for and then install public water infrastructure. And so until that happens, we hope to continue to be able to use this as a temporary solution to make sure that people have enough water to at least survive on a day-to-day basis. So similarly, very excited to share more of our work with you all and to share some of what we've learned.
Thank you. Great, thank you very much. Mily?
Okay. I should have told you before, David. Thank you so much and Shannon for inviting me. And I know that Aria from Waterdrop must have given the recommendation that I be invited. Thank you so much. And I should say my name, how it's pronounced is Mily. Mily Treviño-Sauceda. It's okay. I should have told you before. Nonetheless, here I am and very happy to share that I am the executive director of Alianza Nacional de Campesinas. It's a national alliance of farmworker women. We started the movement here in the Coachella Valley, where I live, again, where there's a lot of history of farmworkers organizing in terms of labor rights. And with the United Farm Workers, we were part of that. I come from a migrant farm worker family, and not until we arrived in California, I was a teenager during that time, and we learned about the United Farm Workers, and we learned about our rights as workers and how much what we should be doing in terms of the wage theft, the pesticide poisonings, and many other issues that from there on. Líderes Campesinas is the first statewide organization that we formed based on a work that we did here in the Coachella Valley with a group of women, farmworker women, all campesinas, and we all felt it was important, the group here, to do changes in our communities because we didn't have the representation in society, in the school district and in the local city governments, etc. And so we did some good changes in terms of getting out people from office and getting people into office, etc. So not only in the city council, but the school district, and first ever time a school was named under Cesar Chavez. That was in 1990-91. He was still alive. He passed away in 1993. So it was a historical moment for us because we were the ones that brought up the idea of that. In terms of why we formed, it has to do with all the different issues that we were facing, and we needed to join to find out what we could do to make changes, because the representation was not there. We were not going to be waiting for someone else to come and quote unquote save us, no? And but because of the work we did here, we ended up organizing around California. And of course, the group here in the Coachella Valley got heavily involved and has continued working since 1992 as part of Líderes Campesinas. Líderes Campesinas means farmworker women leaders. And there's about 15 different groups organized in 15 different regions throughout rural California. And it's about getting the women involved and so they could deal with the local issues. And here in the Coachella Valley, we have had issues within several decades already about what is in the water. And in southeastern, the Coachella Valley, there's where most of the farm workers live. And there's different areas pretty much away from each other where farm workers live. And at the same time, because of the pandemic now, of course, Líderes Campesinas continue organizing, and then we had a commitment to organize nationally, but I'm going to focus on the Coachella Valley because it deals with how important it is for our groups to continue involved with other groups to create change. It's not about just individually or as a group, but collaborate with other groups to make sure that there's change in our communities. At the same time, it's so important that as a group, as a women's group, and a unique group of being farmer girl women, many have very little school or none. But in terms of being intelligent, we found very early that we are. Just to conclude this part, I do want to share that because we found arsenic in the water several decades ago, groups formed, and Líderes Campesinas was one of the groups that has been working through other coalitions that they've been collaborating in. And then the pandemic happens. It made it worse to the point that it was for us, it became, we knew we were already working on a lot of issues that deal with wage theft, pesticide issues, the pesticides that are thrown there into the water, and then our communities have to deal with those kind of issues at the same time. Then the pandemic created more issues because it was the first time in 2020 that agricultural workers were called essential workers. Oh my God, we always knew we were essential. Why? Because we're the ones that work and harvest the plants and harvest the fruits and vegetables. And if we stopped working, there was not going to be any more food in the supermarkets or in our tables. So, but we were never provided the support or the equipment to be able to take care of ourselves. And because of that, we saw as groups, we saw that it was so important to go out there and visit families. And we did find that there was more poverty that was being created because of what was going on with the pandemic. Much more, it increased even more. And then the issue of water is families cannot even use water to wash their hands or bathe. So to the point of several groups pushed this the local government or the county to press the trailer park owners to make sure that these owners provide because they were already charging for utilities, and one of them was water, and they were paying for water they could not use. So they started providing, but not enough. Only a gallon a week per member of the family. You have to use a lot more. And thank you for Water Drop as we started doing our work in distributing food, and Food Forward bringing food from LA, and Water Drop from LA also providing that, and Bolo's Pantry. We have been feeding and providing food and water and many other things that are very important to more than 1,600 families a month. And that is, for us, that's a big success. At this point, I'm going to shut up because I will continue talking, but there's more that all three of us are here to provide for you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. And you'll have lots of chances, Mily. Thank you very much for that great introduction. The work that you're all doing is extremely important, and it's filling a void. How familiar with your work and supportive of it are local officials or other elected officials? Have they offered additional resources or assistance to your efforts? Or have they called upon your expertise to help address these problems? Katie, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think this is such an important question because, like Mily said, none of what we do is by ourselves. None of the things that we do can be solved by ourselves. And so just to give a little bit of background for folks who don't know about sort of the governing structure of the Navajo Nation, there are 110 chapters across the Navajo Nation, which is a huge area. It's about the size of West Virginia. Each of these chapters, they're kind of like municipalities. They have their own chapter governments where there's a president, vice president, treasurer, all of that. And local politics dictate pretty much everything. If you want to do any project on the Navajo Nation, you need to be in contact with the chapter. Otherwise, it's just not going to be successful. And so in each of our project sites, we have 3 main project sites: through New Mexico, Navajo Mountain, Utah, and Dilcon, Arizona. In through, we work with another nonprofit in the area, but they've been in the area for years and years, like 20, 30 years, and they've been doing water deliveries in that time. And so we have very strong connections with the chapters in that area as well. We have something that we always seek to do in any of the new project sites that we work in is to get a chapter resolution passed. So it's like a little decree that shows that the chapter is in support of the work that we do. And then in Navajo Mountain and in Dilcon, we actually work directly with the chapters there. We partner with them, and they are responsible for maintaining a water delivery route while we are the ones who are installing the systems and kind of providing like the capital investment. And so from the local level, we don't make any moves without talking with the local elected officials. We work really closely with the Navajo Nation government. So there's also the Navajo Nation Council, where everyone, there are different delegates from each parts of the reservation that are in the Navajo Nation Council. We're very closely connected with them. And we're closely connected also with the Navajo Nation president, as well as other entities that are not necessarily in the Navajo Nation, like tribal government. So IHS, Indian Health Service, which is a big healthcare provider for Native peoples all across the country. They are also responsible for making sure that a lot of people have safe, clean drinking water and safe sanitation systems. And so they're another entity that we coordinate with a lot because we want to make sure that 1, we're not doubling up on work, but 2, that we're deploying in the areas that maybe they can't get to quickly enough, and vice versa. And then we also work with the local utility there. I could name a million other acronyms and things like that we work with, but we are very cognizant that we cannot do any of this work without the support of the tribal government, especially because we are an outside organization. DigDeep, we're based in Los Angeles. Almost all of our Navajo Water Project staff, like excluding me and maybe one other person, are Navajo and from the communities that they serve. And so it's really important that we do that. I will say, in thinking about like additional resources, I think it's kind of taken a long time to get those resources from other elected officials, but we actually have recently been in communication with Indian Health Service because they actually have started trying to roll out a potable water delivery program, which is something that has actually never been done on the Navajo Nation on a large scale. So that's just water trucks with water in them, filling up at watering points, delivering it to homes. But we've been doing that or something similar to that for a little bit longer than they have. And so they actually have come to us and said, like, you're the water hauling experts, aren't you? And we're like, are we? So that was kind of a new thing that has been happening in the last year or so. And I think it really sparked with the pandemic because our services expanded so much during that time. And so long-winded answer, but yeah, I think we're just always trying to work with the tribal government and with local entities as much as possible.
It's great and very, very fulsome and important answer. We appreciate you. Aria, what about that? Working with local officials and their knowledge and recognition of your work and their support?
Yeah, I would say that unfortunately our relationship with government agencies in Los Angeles is quite different. For the last 2 years, we have been trying to work with the mayor's office of LA, so with Eric Garcetti's office, to improve upon water infrastructure and to raise awareness about the issue of widespread water insecurity with a very large chunk of their constituents. But unfortunately, we haven't made much progress. And a lot of our focus has been actually just around improving the functionality of some of the existing infrastructure in Skid Row. So just for background, in about 2020, a group of other activists advocated for drinking fountains to be put into Skid Row because there was absolutely nothing before that. So now if you go to Skid Row, you'll see 8 just regular drinking fountains like you would see at a park. The issue there, though, is that they never developed a maintenance plan, and the city to this day does not have a designated entity that is repairing them, cleaning them on a daily basis, anything like that. So if you go and look at them, they're frequently clogged. The water stream is really low, and in a pandemic, and if they're not being cleaned regularly, you really don't want to put your mouth very close to it. So all things considered, it's not a good water source. And so a lot of our energy with city advocacy has just been to be, like, hey, the absolute bare minimum you can do is maintain what already exists. But unfortunately, it's been difficult to get them to commit to that. Aside from that, we've been trying to advocate for additional forms of water infrastructure that better meet the water needs, because just like in other communities, people who are unhoused need water to bathe, to clean, to drink, to cook, and the existing infrastructure with the small little spigots, it doesn't give you enough volume of water to really do any of that. So our other advocacy angle has been trying to advocate for spigots or something that would give a greater volume of water so that people don't have to continue tapping the fire hydrants, which again are not meant to be, it's not meant to be regular drinking water. But unfortunately, it hasn't really been a priority for them to address. And we've kind of seen a lot the attitude that adding more infrastructure and spending money on additional infrastructure enables homelessness or encourages homelessness, which is to us clearly not the issue. But unfortunately, it's a bit, there's a lot of work that I think needs to be done around switching that narrative. The other thing that I would add is that the city has asked us regularly to help distribute water during heat waves. They've asked us to give out supplies on their behalf, to do community surveys on their behalf, but they have never offered us financial support to do so. So it's a really interesting contrast, because we do know the community decently well at this point, and we're trying hard to advocate, but the city, will often give us very placating answers that, and kind of imply that they would be willing to help, but they just don't have the resources to do so, which, is more indicative, I think, of a lack of concern for low-income people and people of color that exist in their city. One light of hope that I will mention is that the county, so Supervisor Hilda Solis's office, has committed some funding to us to help with this issue. And that is the first positive government interaction that we've had so far. So major shout out to them.
That's cool. You're on mute, David.
Thank you for your comments. Aria, it's very sobering and unfortunate. You mentioned at the beginning that your goal would be to eventually not have to exist. Clearly, it's good that you do exist, and maybe down the road, the city will recognize the importance of your work. Mily, what about your organization and your work? Support from, knowledge about your work by public and elected officials?
Well, it varies. It varies. There are some public officials that are very responsive, and at least Dr. Raul Ruiz, who's a congressperson covering this district, has been able to work in trying to get funding so that there's, because we have a Salton Sea, we have whomever knows about this area, there's a lot of cleaning that needs to be done in that lake, and it has to do with how many companies have used that lake to just, wash whatever chemicals off, the equipment that they use for applying chemicals and many other things. And it wasn't just the company's use of cleaning the pesticides in their equipment, but also other not taken care of by the county. And I'm talking about not just Riverside County, but it's also Imperial County, because the lake covers both counties. At the same time, there has been very little. There has been some work by the county board of supervisors, but not enough. I think that there's a lot of need in the Coachella Valley of public officials to sit down and start listening to our communities and hear them talk about what are the real issues and how important it is that they move quicker. They move to make sure that it's an emergent situation about the county pressing the owners of all these trailer parks, because there's too many places that these owners are not necessarily following up. There's no monitoring if it's really happening and how they're doing the distribution there. There's many families that are not getting the support that they need to have. And aside from that, what happens to all the other families that live in their households? They have a home or they have their own trailer or a space, and they're paying for water that's cannot be used, etc. So in terms of, I go along with what Aria is talking about, how important it is for them to really put effort and attention to public officials here too. The issue is so strong for thousands and thousands of families not to have water, not even to use for, to wash dishes or wash your hands or bathe. That tells you a lot. And then only getting 1 gallon per week by member, it's not enough. How much are we supposed to be just drinking water every day, etc. And then dealing with everything. It has to do with, all this, the situation of all these people, all these families living under poverty, and are the families that need more assistance, more attention, are the ones that are getting the least. And mind you, all these communities are farm workers. They're essential workers. Again, I will repeat again and again, we can be called anything, but we're not respected. Just, we're called that way because we needed to continue the work. We needed to make sure that there was going to be food for society, but not necessarily taken care of. So there's a lot of work that public officials need to attend and really pay attention, because maybe many of them might not know that, even though they do know that many of them are undocumented, their children are not undocumented. They were born here and they're going to be voting all the time. And they're going to know who they're going to vote for if they're not getting the responses that they need to have. in this case, good water, good drinking water. That's very essential. We all know it's essential. Water is for you to be able to survive. And if you don't have that, it can create cancer. It can create all these other health issues with our families. And it has been creating a lot of health issues in our communities. And that needs to be, we need to get the attention from all these public officials.
Thank you, Mily. And thank you to all the panelists for your answers to this first question. Before we go on to our second question, I want to remind the audience that there is an opportunity to ask questions within the Q&A box. So please don't hesitate to put your questions in if you have any, and we'll try and get to those before the end of our panel this afternoon. The next question that I wanted to pose to the three of you, the groups and the individuals you serve, what issues do they most frequently raise with respect to concerns or worries or apprehensions with regards to water justice, basic water needs? You've touched upon this a little bit, but I was wondering if you might want to expand this. And Katie, why don't we begin again with you?
Yeah, I've been working with DigDeep for 4 years and working specifically on the Navajo Water Project for 3, actually almost 4 years also. But so I've talked to a lot of just community members who will, they will be very upfront about their concerns. And something that that I think I get a lot is just the amount, like the water scarcity issue, because the Southwest is extremely dry, but right now it's drier than it's ever been. There's a mega drought basically in this area, not just in on the Navajo Nation, but also in Southern California. I think it's been going on for about 15, 16 years. And people, I've heard, my own boss has said, I remember when I was growing up here, seeing snow all year round on one of the mountains, like one of the sacred mountains. And we were driving up to it. And she was like, there's no snow right now. And that's really strange. There was an incident about 4 years ago in Arizona on the Navajo Nation where about 200 horses were found dead but from dehydration, famine. They were stuck in like mud from a stock pond that had dried up. And that was it was a really big news story because it was really shocking and really awful. But this is sort of one of the stories that we're hearing about more and more, where animals they can't take care of themselves, or people can't herd as well as they used to. And people themselves know, like they'll go to one of the watering points that they've been going to for generations maybe, and it's coming up dry, or the water quality isn't what it used to be. And so I would say, like, climate change has been something that people do bring up with me a lot, where they're worried about how much water there is. And so I would say that's something that comes up a lot. Another thing that does come up a lot is water quality itself. The Navajo Nation was it was a very productive uranium mining district across the Navajo Nation. So in one of the areas we work in, the Grants uranium mining district was right there. There are a lot of abandoned uranium mines still left on the Navajo Nation. These are Superfund sites that the EPA is responsible for cleaning up, but you can just kind of run into them anywhere. One time, again, my boss and I, we've done a lot of driving, which is why I bring it up, but we were driving and she was like, well, let's go down this road. I've never been down this way before. We get to the end of it, and there's just an abandoned uranium mine that says, maybe don't be over here. And we're like, okay, well, why is this still accessible, really? But that's something that comes up a lot. And there are pretty high rates of cancer on the Navajo Nation because of the amount of uranium that has been found in the water. Same thing that we found as well, like that Mily you talked about, is there's a lot of arsenic too in the water, which is also something that increases as the drought conditions increase. And yeah, so it's water quality. There is a lot of people don't necessarily trust the water that they actually do have, because there have been years and years and years of, uranium mining, other mining, like tailings, entering water supplies. And so, I think that's an issue that, I feel like I think about, and I think probably everyone here does think about a lot, is once the trust has been broken in a community around the quality of your water, it's really difficult to get that back. It doesn't matter if the water is clean. It doesn't matter if you show those tests and you say, this is fine now. People are going to be like, you've been lying for years, so I don't believe it anymore. And that's really, really difficult. So I think those are kind of the bigger things that I've really noticed in talking with community members.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Aria.
Yeah, and just really adding to what Katie said, we've seen a lot of distrust in public water sources as well in Skid Row. Like I said, there are those existing water fountains, but if you talk to people about them, the majority will say, no, I'm not going to drink from it. It's going to get me sick. So I'd rather just save some money and go to the store and buy some bottled water myself. We've seen some other like water innovations over the last couple years in Skid Row, one of them being water boxes. It's kind of like a filtration system as well. And it's nicer, it's maintained better, but similarly there, a lot of people don't want to use them because of that broken trust. And so one thing that we've really had to reconcile with is, like when we're thinking about long-term solutions, how do we find something that people will actually use? So we're trying to do a community survey right now to see what people would prefer just on that end. But, aside from that, I think there are a lot of concerns just over that day-to-day access for a lot of people, either who are from vulnerable population groups or for other reasons. It can be really dangerous to leave your tent in Skid Row and in other encampments. And so, a lot of women don't like walking alone to get water. And so if you have to go, half a mile even to get a couple bottles of water, you may not do that because it may not be worth the risk. And similarly, you also risk your property getting stolen if you leave it unattended for too long. And so again, you have to walk 20, 30 minutes just to get to a water source. That is a really massive barrier that I don't think our public officials really think about. And then second to that too is just physical accessibility. There are a lot of elderly folks, people with physical disabilities who live on Skid Row who may not be able to make that trek and then carry water back to their tents. And so these are all things that people have brought up to us over time, because even if the city puts in like one or two more water spigots, how are they expecting people to be able to access that on a regular basis? And then the other thing that I would just really quickly add is in Skid Row, we see the health impacts of dehydration very clearly. A lot of folks, again, are elderly. Some use substances, some are drinking regularly or have pre-existing health conditions or are taking medications for those health conditions. And you need water for that. And so, these are all conditions that can really increase the risk of severe dehydration and can really worsen your condition. And so we, again, just really need to see that easier access overall.
Very important points. Thank you very much, Aria. Mily.
Yes, I'd like to go back a little bit before I answer that in terms of water justice, and it's connected. The groups, some of the groups that I know that have been involved and pressured and found different ways of trying to get water for their communities have been like the Pueblo Unido, the Polanco Mobile Home Parks. I hope I'm giving the right, I'm very bad with names, okay, so bear with me. The Alianza del Valle de Coachella, and of course, Leadership Council and Líderes Campesinas and other groups who have had to push and find and look for grants or other means to make sure that the communities would get some whatsoever kind of water. But it's not enough, because it's there's groups wanting to do work, but there's thousands and thousands of families that you would have to. And why the groups are doing this work when the county, when, all these taxes that are being paid to take care of the community is not being used the right way. So, or not, it's used in the right way, it's used somewhere else, not necessarily for the right things that we really need. And so there's another issue there here in the Coachella Valley, which is the lithium. Lithium was found here close to the Salton Sea area. And now the government is very much interested in that, but they're not interested in finding out all the people that are in poverty, in terms of what's going to happen with their water, what's going to happen, all these issues. So, and this is information of how the community people that we've talked to, and many of them are our members, are saying, you know what, they have meetings to talk about lithium and the extraction of it in the near future, blah, blah, blah. But they're not giving us all the information. The same thing is that they're not giving us responses in terms of the water issues. They're not giving us many other things at the same time. We're talking about families that live there, that are trying to meet and find out what's going to happen. If lithium is going to be extracted, everything, all the equipment and millions of dollars is going to be used for that. But what is going on with the water? There's no justice. I mean, you see that there's a quote unquote great opportunity to get lithium because it's a source. It's a source. But what happens with all the families that live around there that need, and because they're in poverty, they're not seen, they're not visible. And for us, they are, because they're our community. And many other issues related to that has to do with all the pesticide poisoning, all the different issues that and health issues that families are going through. I'm not sure if some places have been closing down businesses for the same reason. And so there's food deserts, there's, much more. There's lack of being able to, lack of water supplies so that they can go. I mean, people have to drive at times or get into a public transportation, which doesn't go there frequently, to maybe 10, 11, or even 12 miles to go and buy water or food. Because at times when you want to go and there are some convenience stores close by, it's 3 times more expensive than getting to a supermarket, etc. No, so the people know what's going on in the community at a certain point in terms of their health, but what they don't know what's going on is if the government is willing to do or not, if the public officials are giving the priority or not. And those are the issues that they're much more concerned. They already worked for many years trying to get public transportation because it was only going once a day and coming back. And they were successful because they organized. But do we have to do this all the time just so that public officials or people that should be in charge to use our tax funds to the right people or the right issues to attend? I mean, all that needs, it's questionable. And for what right now are election times. Let's try to get the right kind of people on board that are going to be listening and really taking care of our issues. And this is very important for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all of your answers to this question. One of the privileges in working in a university is we do have a lot of people that are truly interested in working on these issues. And we have a question in our Q&A, which I believe, I'm going to assume is from a student. And the question is by Alex Mondares. The question is this: are there opportunities for law students to work under the supervision of attorneys on the issues that the three of you have discussed this afternoon? Anyone like to start an answer on that?
I can start. And I'll be short. I'm not, I'm a historian, so I love to talk about history. But here I can say another of the groups, California Rural Legal Assistance in the Coachella Valley, is more than happy to work with law students, and they have had internships. And they also have been involved with all these issues that are happening, even when there has been issues on because it's about housing issues, health. I work with them 10 years, so I will always support and refer people there. And I got to see law students then later ended up working with these kind of legal services, and believe me, you get a lot of experience because you get to talk to people directly. So that's one. Leadership Council is another one, etc. I mean, over here in the Coachella Valley, maybe in LA County and other places, there might be opportunities for that too. There are always groups that are willing to take in law students or students that are willing to do internships, because it's about making sure people that are going through higher education get the best about and get the reality about what is going on in the community. And the more hands-on that you do, the better you can then practice your profession.
Thank you for that. Katie, Aria, anything you'd like to add?
I'll add really quickly. It's not quite as much an organization that's set up yet, but one thing that Water Drop LA has been working with folks in San Francisco on is the potential to file a lawsuit against the city of LA for failure to meet the basic needs of their constituents. And so we're starting to look into building a case. That's part of why we're doing community surveys as well, so that we can collect accurate data on people's daily water access. And so, in the spirit of mutual aid, if there are any students out there who think that they might have insight into that, who might be willing to help, all of the work that we've done really has been done because of the help of community members. And so I really encourage you to reach out.
Great. Katie, anything?
I will be the one person who doesn't have a suggestion, but mainly because, our organization is so focused on implementation and sort of going through proper channels. Like there are channels, it's just everything is, not oiled. The things are not moving fast enough. So for us, the issue is really a lot of times just a matter of there's not enough funding for a lot of this stuff. So but in terms of thinking about things that I do think could use the attention of an intrepid law student, would be thinking about like the amount of contamination that has happened on the Navajo Nation in particular. Recently, not recently, but 7 years ago, there was a pretty big spill in Silverton, Colorado. Is the Cold King Mine wastewater spill. Put a lot of toxic waste into a really important watershed on the Navajo Nation and in Colorado and New Mexico. And for a long time, and it was actually EPA personnel and EPA contractors who were the ones who spilled that. And so they've taken responsibility, but they haven't really been so forthcoming in offering restitution or payment for that. I think that recently they've awarded some amount in damages, but I don't know, I would say thinking about those kinds of issues are where I would start with if I was a law student.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Alexis, for your question. We have just a couple of minutes remaining. I have a question. I'd like to kind of go around the horn and just, if we could get maybe very brief answers from each of you. I would imagine that the general public remains still minimally aware of the work that you do and the problems you deal with. What one thing do you wish the general public understood about the work you do?
I can start. I would say the one thing that I think people should understand about the work that we do on the Navajo Nation is, I think one of the main questions not main questions, but a question that we get a lot is, why don't people move? If there are all these water issues, why don't people just move? And that is, I think everyone here can just kind of identify that's a sort of silly question. So, because, a lot of times people don't have the resources to move, one. Two, this is their home and they've lived here their entire lives. Their entire family has lived here for generations. And especially on the Navajo Nation, it's not just, oh, I'm just going to move and everything's going to be fine. I don't really care what I'm leaving behind. It's, my actual being is tied to the land. And so it's not realistic to ask someone to move. Even if there are issues with the water, it's just a matter of, there have been issues with the water for a long time because of the actions of the federal government, and that it is our responsibility, as citizens of this country, to remediate that and to make sure that everyone has access to clean running water and sanitation.
Great point, Katie. Thank you. Aria.
Yeah, similarly, I think the first thing that I hope that they would understand is that water is a human right. It's not a luxury. And that providing water via permanent infrastructure is not enabling or encouraging homelessness, but really just recognizing that until we have quality places for people to live, there will inevitably be significant unhoused populations in the city and across the state. And so because of that, we should really be doing absolutely everything that we can to make sure that those who are unhoused are as safe as possible and have the resources to survive when the city cannot offer them an alternative place to go. That should be the absolute bare minimum. And similarly, I was laughing while Katie was speaking because we get so many statements all the time like, well, why don't they just go into a shelter? Why don't they get a job? But a lot of people do have jobs, and a lot of people try to get into shelters, but are constantly rejected because there is not enough space for these qualifications. So I really just, would put that empathy and that level of understanding that I think is necessary, that we should all carry with us on an everyday basis.
Very important. Thank you.
Mily, last word.
Yes, it's for us. It's very important that based on what Katie and Aria mentioned, for us it's so important also that for people to know that agricultural workers not only are essential workers, have not gotten the resources and the services and the appreciation they need to have, the respect to make sure that they live a dignified life. The lack of respect is something very, very important for us to deal with all the time, because because we're not part of the Fair Labor Standards Act, it's very easy for others to come in and exploit and marginalize. So we are an unseen or only seen, and only when the occasion is. We want to be seen all the time.
It's great remarks. Thank you all. Before I thank our panel for this wonderful colloquium this afternoon, I want to make mention very briefly of our next public outreach event through Water UCI. Will be on November 14th. It's our first ever career expo and workshop here at UCI. We'll send out an announcement very soon to the university community. It'll be an opportunity to meet people who work in the water industry and career opportunities that they offer. A particular focus of our Career Expo is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is an industry that clearly needs it and is becoming gradually aware of it. So keep an eye out for that. We'll send out a message. In closing, Katie Janss, Aria Cataño, Mily Treviño-Sauceda, I cannot thank you enough for a really illuminating and just a wonderful presentation. Thank you again. And maybe we'll do this again and hopefully continue to explore these themes with you. Again, thank you. And please, everyone, give it up for our great panel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I just want to mention that I did put a link to our Water Career Expo in the chat if you want more information or if you want to RSVP. So thank you so much again to our amazing panelists. This has been just a fantastic discussion, and we really appreciate you being here with us today.
And Shannon, thank you for all your work and helping put this together, as
Yes.
always.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.